Well, thank you, Katie. I would like to welcome you all to our session today on becoming transfer student friendly and changing the culture of the four-year institution. As Katie said, you are more than welcome to turn on or off your cameras. We will not be offended in either directions. And I do want to let you know that because there are three of us, we are going to be looking at the chat consistently. So feel free to drop anything you want, questions, comments, concerns, snide remarks. Just drop them on in and we will be responding to those throughout the entire session. So my name is Emilie Dubert. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Director of Contemporary Student Services at George Mason University. Because we have a lot of things to share, our presenters will be introducing themselves and giving their pronouns as they pop onto the screen for their section. But I am here joined by Shyama and Casey today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shyama Kuver, and I'm one of the assistant directors in Contemporary Student Services at George Mason Universities. My pronouns are she, her, herself. So before we begin, we just wanted to outline the learning outcomes and goals of our presentation. We want to share with you a deeper understanding of who contemporary students are and how transfer students fit in within that community. And we'll discuss how success for contemporary students supports greater access for all students, including transfer students. And we'll also be discussing how to shift campus culture and services to include transfer students. And finally, we will share with you how to take concepts and create practical ways to support transfer students.
So we thought that what we would do first is really come up with a good definition of what organizational culture is. And there are a lot of them out there, but we really liked the Tierney definition from 1991 because it really sets the nice stage of what we are trying to do at George Mason University. So the definition that Tierney gives is that the organization culture is reflected in what is done, how it is done, and who is involved in doing it. It's concerned with the decisions, actions, and communication, both at an instrumental and symbolic level, as well as getting into the culture of an organization grounded in the shared assumptions of the individuals participating in the organization. So I've highlighted a few things on here, and as I'm talking through this, we would love to have you put some of your ideas in the chat of what the organizational culture of your university is towards transfer students, because here are some of the things that we found at our institution. The first thing that we found is when we're talking about things like decisions, actions, and communications, we did not believe that our university really modeled a strong organizational culture of transfer students, even though, as I'm going to show you on the next slide, we have so many transfer students at our institution. So one of the things that we saw is that during transfer orientation, is your president speaking, or is it your dean or someone lower? Does your president only show up at something like a new freshman orientation? Looking at your admissions brochures, when we're looking at the pictures in there, we know that our transfer students oftentimes are older students, may be parents, etc. And if your admissions brochure is only reflecting those who are 18, that doesn't really send the right message. That shows you a little bit about your institutional culture. When we think about the shared assumptions, one thing that we found that might be really interesting, and you might notice at your four-year institution, is that it was an assumption that our transfer students were coming in their junior year to complete their degree in 2 years and be done, and that they didn't want to be involved. This was just something that was permeating throughout the institution. But if you asked people what that meant and where they got that from, it was gut feelings and assumptions. So as we were looking at this, we said, wow, we really have a culture that doesn't have a strong transfer organizational culture. So this was something that we hope that you all are able to reflect on, and we're going to go into how to do this later on. What we do want to say, though, is we recognize that changing organizational culture is not fast. So it's not just a matter of putting up a new picture of your older students and then saying, oh, look, we've changed the culture. We know that's not the case. So what we want to do today is share with you some of the things that we've done, some small initiatives, programs, advocacy, and education to think about how we changed our organizational culture and how we're continuing to today. So as every session that you're probably going to, you're learning a little bit about the university context. So we are located outside of Washington, D.C. in Fairfax, Virginia, in the suburbs. And we are an institution that has over 37,000 undergraduate and graduate students. What is interesting about our institution is that we are very, very young. And in fact, in 1975, we had 17 students. Yes, 17, 17. So we have grown from 17 students to over 37,000 in approximately 50 years. So we are a really fast growing institution. And because of where we are located in Northern Virginia, we have a really strong pipeline of transfer students from our Northern Virginia community college system into our institution. So while we have about 3,500 new freshmen a year, we do see about 5,000 transfer students a year, most of those from the community college system. One of the things that we have noticed too is that with our partnership, we have multiple ways for our transfer students to come into the institution. So we created a few years ago the advanced program, which essentially is a transfer program where students can complete a bachelor's degree in 4 years, being co-enrolled at both the community college and at Mason. We also have pathways to the baccalaureate and some other dual enrollment programs as well. So there's multiple ways for our students to come into the institution. Now, one of the things that we think is interesting, as you all probably know at your institutions as well, is that our transfer students are not typical 18, 19, 20-year-olds. So you can see a little bit about the population of students that are coming in. They are older, about a fifth of our population is over 25. Over 1,500 students have self-reported that they are student parents. And then about 75% of our students live off campus. So even though we do have 25% living on campus, a majority are living at home or in the surrounding community and would be considered what you would call commuter students. So we also have a lot of diversity at our institution, and we are a majority minority institution. So as we thought about those things, when we were starting to assess our institutional culture, one of the things that we realized is that there were a lot of problems in serving our transfer students and our other populations that fall under transfer students. So the first thing is we realized 2 years ago when our office was started that we didn't really have comprehensive assessment on what our transfer student culture was like. When you were asked about transfer students, as I mentioned before, it was a lot of gut feelings. And we know that that's not the best way to make huge decisions on what we should be doing as an institution. So what we found through that assessment was that there were a lot of problems leading to our transfer students not really fitting into the university as well as we would like. So one of the first things that we found was that even though we have so many transfer students every year, and that most of the students that graduate each year from Mason were transfer students, our faculty and staff were just not resourced to serve these student populations, to serve the transfer students and other contemporary student populations, as well as a low visibility and awareness of these contemporary students. So what this means is that if half of your class is a transfer student, our professors just didn't really have an awareness of how they were able to really connect with the unique needs of each of those students. So we really were focusing a lot of our time, attention, and resources on our traditional freshman residential population. So what this meant was this was leading to a low sense of belonging to Mason among our contemporary students, particularly our transfer students. I think one of the big things that our assessment showed us was that while our transfer students reported about a 20% lower sense of belonging to the institution, they were actually reporting higher Patriot pride. So our mascot is the Mason Patriot. So they were saying they were proud to be here. They were excited to be at our institution. They just didn't feel like they belonged to the institution. And we recognized a lot of that was because of the culture of the institution. One of the things that we also saw was with this addition of all these transfer and online students, as that population was growing, because as you saw, the numbers were continuing to grow, and stronger partnerships with these other community colleges and our Mason Online program, what this was actually doing was creating divisions between even our transfer students. So with many of the resources going to this new exciting advanced program, some of our more traditional admits and their guaranteed admissions were not feeling as included in the campus culture. So we saw that even within our transfer student population, there was a bit of division. So with all that being said, our student experience had so many obstacles that we knew that this was not just a problem that one program or initiative was going to fix. We really needed to change the culture of the institution. So with that, our office, Contemporary Student Services, was created in 2019. And the mission statement the vision of our office was to disrupt the normative views and systemic obstacles of higher education to amplify the success of contemporary college students at Mason. So in a nutshell, our vice president of student affairs, because we are housed under student affairs, was set out to change the culture of the institution as a whole. So while we do some student-facing programs, services, and initiatives, really what our main goal was to advocate and educate the faculty, staff, and surrounding community of who was here and how we could best serve them.
Awesome. So hi, everyone. My name is Casey Machuga. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm also an assistant director at George Mason University in the Contemporary Student Services office. And I am here to answer all of those hot button questions about the word contemporary that we're putting in the chat here. So as Emily mentioned, with the context of our university, we have a lot of students who fall outside of the norm of what we think of in higher education as a traditional college student. The word that we use to describe these students are contemporary, and I'm going to tell you why. When we think about transfer students at George Mason University and across, the country, we need to be using a contemporary lens to think about these students. At George Mason, our contemporary students are transfer students. They're also off-campus and commuter students, adult learners, student parents, fully online learners, foster care alumni, military-affiliated students, and the best part about using the word contemporary is that we can include other emerging populations that will require additional support to navigate the challenges presented by our institutions and processes. These are students who don't always see themselves reflected or fully supported in college outreach materials or in campus programming. And transfer students are considered contemporary as many do not follow the traditional path to a four-year institution. So you're all thinking, why do we use the word contemporary instead of non-traditional? We feel that non-traditional is an inadequate way to describe this population of students. The student population at institutions of higher ed are more diverse than ever, with increased diversity in gender, age, race and ethnicity, and other factors that don't align with the traditional college student image suggests that it's no longer appropriate to call these students non-traditional. These students are the majority. Changing the non-traditional or post-traditional label to contemporary won't solve all of the issues in higher ed, but the shift in language does shift our thinking. And when we shift our thinking, that shifts our assumptions and behaviors. This shifts us to thinking that these are the students we need to serve, and it's our job to stop seeing them as different and start creating academic environments that they need, not the academic environments that mirror the past that we're trying to adjust to fit them into. With all that being said, unfortunately, contemporary students are at a significantly higher risk of not completing their degrees compared to their traditional peers, and that includes transfer students. Money talks as well. Strategically, we need to include contemporary students. We need them to persist because 73% of college students fit into one or more category that's considered contemporary. So if you consider that there are roughly 14.5 million students enrolled in public institutions across the United States, that's over 10 million contemporary students. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of math, so if it's wrong, don't come at me. My undergrad degree is English literature. But if the average cost of a public education in the United States is just under $10,000 annually, and you multiply that by the amount of contemporary students we have in the United States, that's over 100 billion tuition dollars that come from contemporary students each year. And that's a lot of tuition dollars at stake for those students to not feel valued, supported, or empowered to succeed and graduate. And we know with the trends that the number of contemporary college students on our campuses will just continue to grow and change. So we have to be ready to support them, include them, and amplify their voices to ensure that they're successful.
And that's why we like to include them within the contemporary student community. And as facilitators, we wanted to give you all something tangible that you could take with you to support your work. I recognize that I'm about to say a lot of words, and in another world, we would be able to be hands-on together and talk through this rubric. But feel free to ask questions in the chat and reach out to us using our contact info at a later time too. So we designed this rubric as a way to assist members of the higher education community engaging the progress of their campus's support services and accessibility for contemporary students. We've redeveloped it to be more transfer student specific for the conference. When we use the term institutionalized or institutionalization, what we mean is that transfer students have access to resources, a sense of belonging, and are incorporated into the college's mission and retention and equity measures across campus. The use of rubrics in supporting contemporary students helps us define what success looks like. And when we create new initiatives, it lets us know when we've achieved some of those new initiatives. They also help us define our goals in more accessible and transparent ways, making our strategic planning more attainable and collaborative. More institutional stakeholders can easily understand the shared mission, and they can even support the work that needs to be done to reach partner goals. Rubrics are also helpful in translating theory and best practices into practical steps and goals. So Emily's sharing with you right now, and I think it's on the app too, the rubric that we want to share with you all. So the use of rubrics as a self-assessment tool, this rubric is designed to facilitate dialogue among colleagues regarding the state of transfer institutionalization on your campus. Therefore, there's no one right way to use the rubric, since a campus's unique culture and character will determine which of the rubric's dimensions are focused on most intensively. The dimensions and components of the rubric can be adapted to meet the needs of your campus, and they should be. What is most important is the overall status of the campus's institutional progress, rather than the progress of individual components. So you can see here, these are the dimensions: philosophy regarding contemporary students and the mission for their success, and the components are parallel to those. So while it's structured in 2 dimensions, and these can be considered as like key factors in higher education to successfully institutionalize a new initiative and create cultural shifts. Each dimension is comprised of several components that characterize the dimension. And for each component, there's also a 3-stage continuum of development that's been established. And you can completely change that if you need to for your campus. Here we have it progressing from stage 1, which is foundation building, to quality building, and then finally stage 3, which is sustained institutionalization, meaning that transfer student support is weaved into the fabric of your institution. Some institutions could even have just key individuals and stakeholders across campus use the rubric individually to conduct a self-assessment of the campus, and the individuals can then come back and compare with one another. And then that can create a great dialogue regarding the similarities and differences between individual members' impressions. And hopefully that can be helpful in finding some gaps. Other institutions may wish to discuss the dimension or component in detail and then come to a consensus regarding which development stage best characterizes the campus's development for each component of the rubric. While some institutions will give an overall score for each dimension, other institutions will look at each component individually. What is most important is the result of the self-assessment are used to guide the development of a strategic action plan for institutionalizing transfer student support on your campus. So I'm gonna go ahead, Emily, can you go to the first dimension? So this is the rubric, and this is dimension 1, which was philosophy regarding contemporary students and a mission for their success. So a primary component of transfer institutionalization is the development of a campus-wide shared definition that provides meaning, focus, and emphasis for the effort made for transfer students. How narrowly or broadly it's defined on your campus will affect which campus constituents participate or don't participate, which campus units will provide financial resources and other support, and the degree to which transfer students will become a part of your campus's well-being and have a shared sense of belonging on your campus. Can you go to dimension 2? So dimension 2 is the institutional support for transfer student success and inclusion. So in order for transfer student support to become institutionalized on college and university campuses, the institution must provide substantial resources, support, and weight toward that effort. We all know that. So this dimension is focused on holding the institution responsible and accountable to transfer students and other stakeholders. So while we want transfer success to be on everyone's radar, just like we want diversity and equity and social justice to be on everybody's radar, if it's not somebody's job, the reality is that's how we know that, things fall through the cracks. So we want to know who is actually responsible and accountable to our transfer students throughout campus. This is not a one-person job. So if you have one person responsible for transfer students on your campus, advocate for them to get a raise and support them in developing a coalition of people who share this responsibility with them. So can we go back to dimension 1 real quick? So I just want to give you an example of what this looks like on our campus. So while transfer students are included directly into the George Mason strategic plan, and there we're at stage 3 within this component, we still are not in complete alignment with the institutional mission and values component. There we're probably still at a 2. So we couldn't say that we're at a point of sustaining institutionalization fully within this dimension. And then if we go back to dimension 2, the same goes here. For example, at Mason, we have multiple institutionalized coordinating entities who support transfer students while they're still at their community college and then when they come to campus, but we don't necessarily have a consistent source of hard funding or a policy-making entity at our campus. And if you have any other questions about this rubric in particular, please feel free to reach out to us because we really want to share it and make it better.
Awesome. So I just wanted to share some of the successes that we've had in our office utilizing the rubric to make our institution more transfer friendly. We're continuously moving through those stages of foundation building and quality building with ultimate goal of having that sustained institutionalization of transfer student success and support. So for example, our office noticed that first-time freshmen were receiving a lot of holistic support through several avenues on campus. With the COVID-19 pandemic, our Housing and Residence Life department shifted towards offering virtual learning communities. So now any freshman student could participate in a living learning community, no matter if they were living on or off campus, which really opened things up for freshmen. We also implemented professional staff success coaching at Mason within the last 2 years, where every new freshman received a professional staff success coach. And of course, our academic advising units continue to offer great pre-orientation and orientation advising to new students. What we noticed, though, was that our transfer students weren't necessarily receiving the same support and holistic resources that would help in their transition. So the assumption on our campus was that transfer students don't really need as much support their first semester as first-time freshmen do. However, we have been really working hard to change that institutional assumption, and our office individually reaches out to every single new transfer student that comes to Mason within the fall and the spring semester to make sure that they're getting tailored support and being aware of resources. In fall of 2020 alone, we met with over 1,500 new transfer students and offered them tailored support based on their needs. Also, the peer advisors that we employ in our office, they meet with the students one-on-one throughout the year. For that job position, we've actually added priority status for transfer students right into the job description so that we are able to make this an organizational priority that we are supporting and including transfer students, and that it's known that we want transfer students represented in our office working at George Mason University. Another success that we have had is we've been able to create and fine-tune a website for our office. It's contemporary.gmu.edu that names all of the contemporary populations that we work with and provides tailored resources for each population. So if you look at our website, you'll see a page for transfer students. This website shifts organizational culture because it's actually naming transfer students as a significant identity on our campus and gives them a place to go that's curated for them. Noticing that many of our transfer students also share other contemporary identities, as we've mentioned before, such as being a parent, for example. A group of faculty, staff, and students formed to help support student parents. Working with the Title IX office, we've been able to add syllabus language about protections in Title IX for student parents. This has also led to the creation of lactation spaces across campus, as well as the creation of a registered student organization for student parents, which has been instrumental to showing the university that student parents are here and they're prioritized. Finally, like Shyama mentioned, our staff and our office has been instrumental in amplifying the experience of contemporary students in the University Life Strategic Plan, which the strategic plan, which is for 2020 to 2024, it was just released, directly informs the work of all of the departments within the Division of University Life. Because of our advocacy and participation, contemporary students have been named throughout the strategic plan 4 times. We're in the strategic plan with 2 specific goals directly related to the support of contemporary students. This is a huge win for us in changing organizational culture for transfer students and other student populations, because now it's not just a goal for our office, it's a divisional goal. Of course, we are also met with challenges every day in our work supporting transfer students and other contemporary populations. Higher education is just not inherently set up for students outside of the norm, and that's the case with some of the campus partners that we work with at Mason as well. We've continuously had to be the squeaky wheel to get folks to buy into our mission. For example, the university did a student engagement survey in 2017, which showed that transfer students at Mason were more likely to attend an event that has the word transfer in it. And I use this because it seems like a no-brainer idea. If you create a program and you put the word transfer in it, transfer students are going to show up, or they're more likely to. However, this has actually been a significant challenge for us to get folks to buy into. So we've been working with campus partners to help them rethink some of their current services and just adding transfer students to the name of their existing programs, which has been an uphill battle in some directions. Also, despite having the largest population of students to consider, we do not have the same kind of resources and funding that larger offices on campus have, which definitely makes it hard for us to make those careful decisions about what our priorities and goals will be for each academic year. Also, as we know, transfer students need accessibility and flexibility in being able to access resources on campus. This is the one area with the coronavirus pandemic that has helped us in making sure everyone is accessible. I mean, virtual appointments has really allowed us to expand our outreach and has allowed our campus partners to meet with more contemporary students and transfer students outside of their normal business hours, offering those virtual appointments in evening hours, which we are confident will continue even when we're back on campus. Finally, our professional and student staff members right now on our campus do not work in the same physical location. So we are housed in 2 separate buildings across campus, which can lead to staff feeling disconnected from each other and the students that we serve not really knowing where to go. So looking to the future, this is one area that we're hoping to add to our successes list in the coming years.
So before we come to our concluding questions and open up discussion, please remember to complete the NISTS evaluations. This is very helpful to us as facilitators and practitioners and to the organization as a whole. So considering our successes and challenges that Casey just shared and the rubric for self-assessment, what does transfer-friendly post-secondary institution culture look like to you? And I think at this point, you can just share and put it in the chat, whatever you feel comfortable with. And you can also ask questions too.
And it's totally okay if you don't know what that looks like for your institution right now. We literally just gave you the rubric. I'm sure you haven't had time to do an institutional evaluation of all of your practices. So feel free to be considering that as we talk, and we can also open this up for general questions as well. So any thoughts that you have on the questions on the screen, or any thoughts about our presentation, questions that you have, we would love for you to take these questions. You have them in the presentation on the app back to your organizations and ask them to your decision makers, your policy makers, and really start to engage in the conversation on how to become more transfer friendly.
So I think so I was just going to say, my name is Joanna Pridemore. I'm from the University of Michigan Dearborn. I think that the rubric is very helpful. We are in a position right now that we are looking, we're about 49% each year of transfer versus freshmen. So we are looking to, again, be more transfer friendly because, again, we, I think, have always functioned that transfer students just came versus it being intentional. We have a community college right next door. So again, students would just come. So now it's the intentionality about it. How do we educate campus about our transfer students, their needs, how they're different? I love your guys' use of contemporary college students versus non-traditional, because I really think that it's important that I think a lot of institutions, my own as well, is freshmen are what people plan for and transfers are what happens. So I think that we're definitely looking to move toward transfers is what we plan for as well. Even if it's 2 different trajectories, someone's planning freshman, someone's planning transfer, and having that expertise that is doing it versus just letting it happen or tacking on to what we're already doing for freshmen. But I think that rubric's really great. I'm going to take it back for our planning. I just sent it to my boss actually, so thank you for sharing.
I really appreciate that comment. And I love that quote of planning for the freshmen, but transfers are what happened, because that is exactly what we have found in our work as well. That the number of transfer students that just come because we are 20 minutes down the road, 40 minutes with traffic in DC, or more. It's just that we know they're going to come and that we don't have to do as much to serve them. So I really appreciate that, that comment a lot. And I think that that actually goes to one of the questions that that was put in the chat. And I want to make sure I get that question about how do you get administration buy-in, because I think that that was years ago really the idea, is that the students are just going to show up. Let's focus on getting the out-of-state freshmen in. Let's focus on trying to build up a national profile. But I think that one of the things, and Casey mentioned this as well, is just dollars. That right now we are in such a state, especially because of COVID and students having the ability to take online classes where they could live and work in DC, but take classes in California, that we're going to have to be more competitive in our marketplace. And I think that that's one thing that really helped get institutional buy-in and upper administration. I think one of the other things too is when you really do assessment, it opens the door to a lot of new talking points. And I think one of the things that we have found through some of our assessment and advocacy is a lot of the faculty are telling us that the transfer students are some of their best students in the class. And I think that a lot of the national data and our institutional data is showing us the same thing. Just the GPA of our students is higher. For transfer students, they come in, they're ready to learn, they're ready to be that next leader. And so getting that importance and getting that message across of our transfer students aren't just here because we were the only option, but they're here because they are phenomenal students who are ready to take on the world, has been a really compelling narrative too, as we have been able to show how many of our transfer students are involved in different research opportunities and just excelling in the classroom. So, that I think that's part of changing the culture, right? Changing that narrative. So I haven't been monitoring the chat. Casey, is there any questions that you haven't gotten to answer that you would like me to jump up and answer?
Yeah, I'm just kind of trying to answer some as we go, but kind of exciting folks about the name contemporary and exciting them about prioritizing contemporary students. Just Emilie can take this, but it also helped that our vice president of university life was excited about this. It was one of her goals. And so that definitely helped us with that. But Emilie, I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I will say, because I was involved in the conversations of naming contemporary, as far as we know, when we chose that name in 2019, we did not find any other offices across the country that were named that. So if you all know about that, please send them in our direction because we'd love to chat about that. We just saw that a lot of the words that are used in research, as you all probably know, are non-traditional and post-traditional. We knew that that wasn't what we were looking for, even though that was the term that was used so often, because we knew that if we put up a non-traditional office and named our office that, our students just wouldn't feel included. That was othering them even more than we wanted to do, which was the exact opposite of what our student population, what we want to do for our student population. The other thing too is we are sticking with the word contemporary because we don't know who the next big population will be. And so 5 years down the road, I mean, I know this sounds silly, but those of you who go to orientation know you don't want to be buying a new tablecloth every year, nor do you want to have a title that says veterans, transfer students, student parents, blah, 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 blah. So we know that whoever the next student population is, because student parents and adult learners are really a pretty new population. We're also just getting into foster care alumni, so students coming out of the foster care system and serving them as well. We're just getting that rolling this year. So we know that we want to be flexible in the naming of that.
I also just think it's important to note, I don't know that if we talked about the history of our office very much, but we did exist as an office before 2019, but we were called Off-Campus Student Services, and we really supported the off-campus student population. Obviously, most of our contemporary populations also exist in the off-campus population. And so we had a little bit of infrastructure with staff. Emilie alone was running that entire office before we came in. And I came in 2018. We made the shift and then we're able to hire additional staff. So anywhere that you can think of that you're already supporting transfer students and other contemporary populations using already existing structures and just kind of rethinking what you're doing. For example, for us, we were waiting for transfer students, off-campus students to come to us to make appointments to tell us what they need. We shifted our entire, process to directly reach out to them. In the first year I was with the office, we were reaching out to and talking to 400 students total. And then I mentioned in the presentation that this past fall we reached out to and met with 1,500. So just kind of rethinking some of the things you're already doing to be more specifically engaging of transfer students and what they would need. I think that's a good place to start if you're not sure, where to get going.
Can I ask a question? Just right up. Okay. So my name's Taylor. I'm from North Carolina State University, and I'm actually serving on a board with the state of North Carolina because we're getting ready to look really heavily more into adult students and veterans, serving veterans even more. And there's a lot of services already in place, but they're looking to kind of take the whole system further for all 17 publics. And a lot of us came up with questions like, how would you advise, and I love the word contemporary, so I can take this back to the board. So I'm going to steal it. So I'm just letting you know that, okay? All right, cool. So, it takes a lot of buy-in from faculty, staff, and advisors, for transfer students. And we feel like that everybody's gotten that kind of in place. Now, would this necessarily need to be a separate group? Because, some people might, I don't know, balk, I guess is the best word, saying, okay, we got a whole nother set that, of students, critical, no doubt. Is this going to need to be like a separate center so that they feel, oh God, how do I want to say this? They feel special. We want them to feel special, but I mean, is this going to take a different group of advisors, a different group of even like, I'm in the admissions office. I recruit. I work primarily with transfer students for the last 22 years. So, and I know you just said that you already had something kind of in place and you expanded on that. How does that expansion necessarily work? Because we have small public universities and we have large public universities. So is it just going to have to be each college fends for themselves? Or I guess my questions are all over the place. I'm sorry.
I can speak to that a little, and hopefully this helps. And also knowing that while we've dealt with this because we have a few regional campuses, we're clearly not a state system. So it will definitely look like that.
Right.
But I would say
I know a few of your recruiters actually from the past.
Oh, do you? Oh, great. Yeah. Well, so I would say no. And I say this for a few different reasons. One, we still have people who specialize only in transfer students on the campus, specifically transfer admissions. We still have our Office of Military Services. So even though we have a connection to them, there's 5 or 6 people set up in that office for that. So really thinking creatively, I think our kind of work could be done even with just a board or people able to give a little bit of capacity and create the advocacy and buy-in. I know one challenge is actually because we have our office now, people come to us and say, do this program, do this service, reach this student population. We're like, no, we're trying to help you in your work as the Student Activity Center or Career Services work with these student populations. So I don't think you necessarily need people specifically dedicated to it. I will say it helps because we've been able to do some really neat things with the amazing staff. But it's really just once you create that buy-in, I think that that's what changes. And to be honest, before this, we actually had an off-campus advisory board, which was faculty and staff when it was just me in the office. That helped kind of build up the momentum to move us in the direction to create bigger change, if that helps.
Yeah, it does. It's just that, different size schools have different budgets and, everything. And then things can be handled in different ways when it comes to advising and onboarding and, the whole shebang, everything.
Oh, absolutely.
So
yeah. We understand.
But like I said, it's this board that that's being done by General Administration for the state of North Carolina. And so I got invited on it just to get, one perspective out of many. And and we're trying to think of something that might be something that could, those commonalities, I guess, big word. I'm not sure if that's the right one I want to use, but anyway, Yeah, I mean, this is very intriguing. So I'm glad to see this and everything like that. And the Rubic's going to definitely help as well also, because I think it can be where some schools are going to have to use what they've got in place and maybe just do some adjustments or some widening here and there per person. And others might be able or might be lucky, a large university might be able to put something, to the side that specializes just for them, or they may even have to combine it as well. So it's just a matter of having open mind and having everybody think about their own individual campus.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no, I absolutely agree with that. And like even one of our regional campuses primarily graduate students. So we actually tend to work more with that because that's a lot of the people in our population as well.
See, in our campus, grad students, we're completely different. Those two offices are completely separated from each other. I mean, some of us don't even really know any names over there in the graduate school. So it's really it's just each campus is just different. So, okay. But no, that was very helpful. Thank you so much.
Taylor, with what you're saying about feeling like a distance between some of these different colleges, I think contemporary student communities can be a great unifier in that.
Yeah.
They are literally everywhere. And, when we work with our Center for it used to be the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Multicultural Ed,
Yeah.
but we work with these offices because these students literally are everywhere, and they're first year students, transfer students, and they're graduate students.
Yeah. And then you got the whole military perspective, segueing them from military to civilian life as well also. So, I mean, there's some unique nuances that are going to be involved from a lot of different angles. It's like a 5 points coming into an intersection, 5 different streets coming into an intersection, or we'll call it 10 point, 12 point, like that, and trying to, figure out the best way to make everybody feel inclusive and, and that you're there for them basically. And that's really the main goal when we were talking about it, and this will be great information to, take back as well also. But I applaud what y'all have done. That's awesome. I think it's amazing. So kudos.
Well, thank you. Well, I know we are out of time. It's 5 o'clock, so it's time to punch your time card. So I'm going to turn it back over to Katie now. Thank you.